Good morning, Sally, and very, very welcome to the Cambridge and Aviva Partnership Conference. It's super that you can join us. I think everyone knows me. I've already introduced myself, but hopefully you could say a couple of words to introduce yourself to everyone and your frankly quite frightening and brilliant career that you've had over the last years.
I've stopped eating people for breakfast a few years ago, don't worry. Owen, it's great to meet you and it's lovely to be here. So if we're in Cambridge and I've got to introduce myself, then clearly I'm the first woman master of Trinity College. I started almost exactly a year ago. Before that, I was the Chief Medical Officer for England and Senior Medical Advisor to the UK government. And before that, I ran research for the Department of Health and set up the National Institute for Health Research. And ran it for 10 years with its £1.25 billion of research money. So I'm a clinical doctor who's gone into policy and delivery, I have to say.
Awesome. So look, as we could talk for hours about all of that, I'm sure, but there's one specific topic we were going to try and talk about today, which was the Trinity challenge that you're heading up and setting up. I just wanted to give you the opportunity just to perhaps tell everyone a little bit about it and why you're excited about it.
I'm terrifically excited because the Trinity Challenge brings together some of the best minds in the world from Aviva and Cambridge University, but many other founding members that we can talk about, including Microsoft, Google, LSE, Northeastern University, Singapore, Hong Kong University. But it brings together these great people to work basically on data with deep analysis to try and stop us having another COVID in the future. So the premise is, if we'd thought really deeply 5 years ago, would we have done things differently? And now, what do we want to do to make sure that in 5 years' time and 10 years' time, we're better off? And clearly, if we explore the data, we can build tools that will perhaps tell us early when something's happened. We can find better ways to handle the medical response, but actually the economic and health recoveries, because, you know, without health, you don't have a strong economy, but without a strong economy, you don't have a good health system.
Yes, the interrelation between those things is just so difficult to understand, and as a data person you look at it and feel hugely excited about the opportunity to sort of take part in helping to understand that. In terms of your thinking around the different components of that and how we start to chunk that down into separate parts of the challenge, have you thought about that and what do you think those are?
So we think there's three big areas. There's the surfacing, there's something we need to be aware of and take action on. There's the health response, and then the recovery, which is both health and economic. And underneath these big areas, we've set up a number of challenge questions and then some exemplars about how you might answer them. So what would an early warning system look like? If we knew the genomes of all the coronaviruses, would that stimulate the pharmaceutical industry to have a look on their shelves and see if there were drugs that might work if one of these popped out into humans, or to get a pre-pandemic vaccine? To go to the other end of the economic recovery, if we could understand what is the minimum type of lockdown you would need for safety, for health, then you might do less damage to the economy. So can you lock down and open in a much safer way? What is it that people are doing, and how can one restructure economies so that they're not as vulnerable? And that needs mobility data, economic data, and for the health response, clearly there's the health system and medical response, but there's the behavioral response about why do people, some of them wear masks and others not? Why do some people not bother to socially distance? We need to know what's the right message, how to deliver that message, who it should come from, and on what platform to have an impact so people look after themselves, their families and communities, and thus our economy.
Yeah. No, I think that's enormously helpful. I mean, just from an insurance perspective, we protected customers for centuries here in the 320 years of Aviva. Not quite as old as Cambridge, but a fairly old insurance company. And look, these are one of the, pandemic risk is one of those really, really big systemic risks we find tough to tackle. And you only have to look at the economic cost to realise that insurance on its own isn't going to be able to solve all of this globally. And so we're really, really keen to work with you guys and get involved and work out how can we as insurers play our part in that really exciting ecosystem of people you've brought together, and with the public sector and with the private sector and with academia. And that's a really, really exciting approach. In terms of next steps and how we think about going from here, I don't know if you want to give anyone any insight into the timings of the challenge and exactly what we're going to be asking people to do and when we're going to bring it together.
So we're launching on Monday the 14th of September, at which point our website will go live and people will then be able to read about it, but they'll be able to see the 3 big areas for the questions and the exemplar questions underneath. We don't mind if people pick other questions and say, I think I can make a difference. What we're looking for is people coming together and using data, mainly quantitative, but some qualitative as well about behavior may well be important, in order to look for new insights that could lead to different ways of doing things or tools that can be scalable. This is about global public goods. This is not about making lots of money and saving the rich. It's about global public goods. So people will be able to look at the website, see the questions, see who is available to work with, because we expect people to work in challenge teams and often with the founders, though they may bring in other people. And importantly, we've been designing a data catalog. So that will go live. It'll be updated regularly so people can see, oh, that data's open, and they don't have to actually apply for the challenge. They could go and use it. Or, oh, that partner has that data. I'd like to work with them and try and answer question X or Y, and then they can put in an expression of interest and application. So anyone can join in wherever they are in the world. Meanwhile, we're pushing all our founder members, as you know, to start collaborations between the founder members, which is one of the strengths of Aviva and Cambridge working together through our shared centre, which is so exciting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Something you said about zoonotic diseases, and zoonotic is a word, a sort of amateur mathematician, and it's not a word that instantly jumped to my mind, but it's now in front of all our minds, and a whole wide amount of public health theory has suddenly become much more mainstream. I just wanted your views on that, and what a time for science and data this is, just more broadly, to sort of introduce some of these topics. And I don't know if we just broaden the discussion slightly. I don't know if you've got a perspective on that, but it's really interesting.
Well, it's fascinating. When I became CMO, I'm not a public health doctor. I'm a hematologist, a sickle cell disease doctor. So I had to learn all about this. And one of the pushes for me about the Trinity Challenge is that we're beginning to look at different ways of modeling and using mathematical data and numerical data and people in different ways. How come that we're using a flu model from 13 years ago? We have fabulous people in your sort of company and in the universities who could do things differently that might work better. So it is interesting, isn't it? We're all over Zoom drinks or other discussions talking about things we were never talking about, but that richness will change our response. It'll make us better at finding solutions so that we're never hit like this again.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the economic impacts, one of the observations I had initially when we thought about this from an insurance perspective was these things are simply too big to insure. And I think that was generally the agreed. You either have virtually no claims because something doesn't happen, or you get and actually one of the things I'm quite excited about is the option to mitigate and intercept these types of future epidemics on this scale much, much earlier, because I think that is the way that, to your point, you avoid the economic impact. Our customers, both businesses and private individuals, can benefit from not having the disruption in the first place. And I'm sure we spend a lot of time in the insurance industry looking really hard to mitigate risk so our customers don't have to claim in the first place. And this is a really big example of how I think I'm really excited about working together to try and solve some of that.
Fantastic, and I think we can make a difference. And it all comes back to something that doctors don't normally think about, and it's return on investment. If we invest now in tools to handle things better, prevent and handle, then we won't have to expend this ridiculous amount of money. Oh, if only that had gone into people's health and education and better housing. We're doing this the wrong way, and we can turn it around. But, you know, if we invest now in preventing obesity and preventing disease, it'll pay off for society and everything too. So it's interesting that the insurance industry and the world I come from actually have shared objectives of reducing problems, because then you have more money to spend on good things.
Yeah, well, it certainly does. And it's interesting, the interconnectivity that this sort of pandemic highlights. And we're all, the private sector, the public sector, every individual is connected in a way that is much more intimate, I think, than we perhaps thought, or some of us realised, unless you went deep into the economic theory. And it is such a delicate balancing act. And it's very hard to judge others when they're making these sorts of decisions, because you have to have a successful economy, and we have to make that robust, because that pays for all the really good things that we want to see. And it's fascinating how we're having to make choices between public health and the broader economy, because, you know, with a 5-year lens, the outcome is quite different from a 5-month lens, is quite different from a 5-day lens. And I think it's look, I'm just so excited about being a part of the Trinity Challenge. I know we've hugely got huge value already from our partnership with Cambridge, and look, it's great to be part of it. So I think from my perspective, I think that's been wonderful. I don't know if you've got anything else you want to quickly add to the discussion.
A big thank you to you, Owen, but to Aviva and actually Anna Vignoles, who from the Cambridge side has led much of our discussion with you. Because you are one of our anchor founding partners. You came in early, you've helped us shape it, and you're a great partner. So thank you for joining in. And wouldn't it be great if you won?
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing like winning. I mean, yes, it's one of those things we do like to win, but yeah, I think the good news is for this, everyone wins. It's not just a case of us winning. I think if we could all win, I think, as we said, everyone's interconnected. So brilliant. Thank you so much for coming, Sally. And it's lovely to get your perspective. And look, it's going to be such an exciting time. Thank you.
It is. And good luck. And thank you so much. Bye-bye.